Everyone. This is Steven, and welcome to AI Culture. So, today I'm talking with Tyrone. He is a AI professional, a Maori AI professional in New Zealand who does a lot of work with Maori and other Pacific Island Indigenous organizations in New Zealand. And he sits down with them and helps them think about how they can use AI in their organizations. And in particular, he spends a lot of time um, meeting and having discussions and kind of listening to different Maori people's concerns about AI, sitting in a circle, quite literally sitting in the circle. That circle meetings can be very important in Maori culture. So sitting in a circle and listening to concerns. So maybe like many people around the world, there are a lot of Maori workers and organizations have concerns about AI. So this conversation is kind of helpful in thinking about how to implement AI and both how to implement it effectively in a way that kind of listens to people's concerns and tries to kind of graft in ways of thinking about that and building things for organizations that are useful and doing that specifically, I guess, in a Maori indigenous context, but these ideas could apply to people all over the world. So I hope you enjoy. And in case you're wondering, today hiking in Borneo in Malaysia. So this is in I'm in the eastern part of Malaysia. But yeah, I hope you enjoy. Hello, everyone. I'm here with Tyrone Tangata Makiri. How are you doing today?
I'm doing fine, thank you. How you going?
I'm doing well. Yeah, I guess you're in, typical Auckland, which is seems to me it seems like Auckland is always on the cusp of about to rain or, with maybe 30 minutes of sunshine.
Yep, you totally nailed it on the head. Like I'm in my cabin at the back of my house, and I can see the sun, which we haven't been seeing for a while, which I love. But what that means is within the cabin, I'm also like trying to not sweat my shirt out. Let's put it that way. So
There
we're,
we go.
we're lucky for this type of weather. It's not raining, but yeah, it can rain any minute now. If we put it that way.
That makes total sense. Do you want to talk about what you do as a AI you as a person who works with AI and you founded Second Half? Do you want to walk us through what you do and what made you decide to found this organization?
Yeah, cool. So I'll introduce myself too. So OIO, he uri ahau no Ngāpuhi me Rarotonga, ke Okatoia ahau e noho ana, ko Tyrone Tangata Makiri toku ingoa, tēnā koe Stephen, ngā mihi nui ki a koutou. So yeah, hi everyone, my name is Tyrone Tangata Makiri. I come from Auckland, New Zealand. I guess in terms of my genealogy, I come from a place up on north of the island of New Zealand called, also the area called Ngāpuhi, or the iwi's called Ngāpuhi, and also come from the islands of Cook Islands, in a specific place called Rarotonga. In terms of, yeah, my name's Tyrone. I've been doing Second Half for just under 2 years now. In terms of my background, it's always been in kind of creative technologies and kind of how we can use, I guess, technology for good and, bit of creativity in there. But yeah, I've also got a background in community development, so I've done a lot of work working alongside communities and supporting communities, and have recently, or not recently, but I guess my last few years, last 9 years has been in business. So actually growing my own business and supporting other businesses. So what Second Half is basically an organization where we support impact driven organizations to kind of understand and use AI. This has kind of led us into many different places where we've been able to hold workshops and sessions and training with organizations and communities, even families around what AI is and how to use it. And then we also do some, I guess, deeper support, trying to get, I guess, community organizations ready. Because a lot of organizations we've found are in positions where they love to use, agents and all that that comes with AI, but just probably don't have their system and kind of processes in a position to do that. So yeah, we kind of go from training to also, I guess, strategy and system building is kind of what we do as well. So yeah, that's what second half is.
That's awesome. This is really cool. I mean, what's it like working with impact-driven organizations? What's it like doing this work?
Yeah, so I guess, yeah, like I said, in terms of my background, I've always been someone that's wanted to work in communities, and kind of where the desires came from to work with impact-driven organizations was when I was doing the kind of business consulting work, I was working alongside businesses. So we set up a entrepreneurial hub in our local area to support Māori Pacific businesses. And at that time, ChatGPT came onto the scene. So by nature of being in business, we're like, oh, cool, this can help with productivity. We're doing a bit of work with it. And yeah, naturally saw that for business owners or people that are in business that we can use these tools. I actually went back home and was sharing all this kind of stuff with my partner. So she was in corporate retail management, and she was like, "Oh well, could we use that?" And I said, "Yeah, totally. You can do so many things with it." So became this kind of interest between us two of around, man, this is so cool what it can do for businesses, what it can obviously do for the role that she had. But what we would do is go to family gatherings and family evenings and ask our families and even other members of our community, like, have you guys seen this or know about AI? And they're like, I have no idea what you're talking about. So kind of grew this idea of like, if others are playing with it and seeing, both, opportunities and challenges, what about our communities? What about the people that are around us? They have no idea about it. So we actually started this whole work and started trying to support our families. But as you may not know or may know that not all family are going to pay for these opportunities. So what really stuck out to us is that there are impact-driven organizations that really want to support communities and really want to support people that we want to serve. So that kind of led us into working more specifically with impact-driven organizations. Most of them have real desire to support communities, and when I say communities, local communities, and they could also mean Maori communities, or for myself, two Pacific communities. So yeah, we're basically in that space and have found that we can support those organizations who then also serve local communities and people that need that support. So for me, it's been fun because it means that we can really support our people, but there are a lot of challenges that come with something that's still quite new. And when I say new, we're talking about LLMs, obviously large language models here, but when we do our workshops, we actually show a lot of people like actually AI has been a lot of things over time. You just didn't know what those were at that time, like machine learning with social media and all of that kind of jazz. So it's been a real interesting experience working with communities because there's still a lot of, I would say, challenges that we have to overcome, even for them to engage in the conversation. But yeah, this is the kind of place we want to, I guess, contribute to.
Yeah, this makes total sense. And do, are, when you say that you particularly work in Pacific communities, do you particularly work in Pacific communities in New Zealand? So New Zealand-based organizations serving, like impact-driven organizations serving the need of Pacific Islanders in New Zealand, or do you work internationally across Pacific Islands?
Yeah, good question. So we work at the moment with organizations that are based in New Zealand that are supporting Pacific communities, but there are also some that support Pacific communities and also support abroad as well, whether it's to islands like Samoa, Tonga, and Cook Islands. So we ain't doing that work. We're kind of serving them that do that work across both New Zealand and the Pacific Islands.
Yeah, that's awesome. And for context for any viewer on that specific point, but New Zealand, so obviously the Maori people are the typical, indigenous people, the native peoples in the Maori island. But then
Yep.
obviously, so since you have a lot of migration of different Pacific peoples to New Zealand. So like there's a strong Fijian community, there's a strong Samoan community, there's a strong Cook Islander community, et cetera, et cetera. Basically, name a Pacific Island country. There's probably a bit of a community there in New Zealand of people who have migrated there. So it seems like you kind of do a little bit of both. You work with people, the organizations you work with both work within New Zealand, but then also are New Zealand-based organizations that work across the Pacific as well. Um,
Yep.
you
Yep.
you mentioned before that you were talking about challenges. So, like, yeah, what has been some of the kind of what would you say have been the biggest like promises working with these organizations? But then also, what have been the biggest challenges? In my personal experience, working with impact-led organizations, from the tech perspective, their experiences with it can vary widely. I've worked with organizations that are like basically tech organizations and are on like the cutting edge of technology. And I've worked with organizations, impact driven organizations, where like, they basically they don't really have any digital technology, and everything is print. All their data is print data and is stored in a filing cabinet, and kind of anywhere in between.
Yeah. So in terms of the organizations that we kind of work with, they kind of sit in the middle of that. So a lot of them are using, I guess, technology. So obviously within their organization and doing things that, CRMs, either got Microsoft Copilot or Microsoft 365 or got Google Workspace. So they're using technology, but, at the level of just using Excel and Google Docs and not really seeing the vast opportunity that exists in terms of technology you can use. And I guess the promise that we've seen by working with all of these organizations is that, a lot of them are really under-resourced, admin heavy, that again, something as simple as using, Microsoft Copilot, ChatGPT, Google Gemini allows them to not only support them with the work they're doing, but, even having something to support around ideas and thoughts that they may have that would take a while to potentially, create. Have something within your pocket or your device to have those conversations. So I think a lot of them, with the work they've done, and over time too, working with organisations that vary in age. So with people that are as young as 18, working in these organisations to as old as 70, and them seeing kind of the promise around how they can use AI. I want to come back to that because one of the things that we've seen challenges there, a lot of Māori and Pacific, similar to most indigenous cultures, is a real kind of desire to ensure that our planet and our people are doing well. So I guess the conversation of AI, whether you've been able to have informed discussions, for most of our communities, they're hearing something from, what auntie or uncle said, or something happened on social media, or something that's happened in the news that is informing them that, is kind of obviously talking about just the concerns around AI. So one of those being, what does it mean for our environment? And that kind of be a conflicting thing around people even engaging it in the first place. So a lot of what we've seen is that by having, within our workshops, we do touch on some of the technical stuff, but a lot of it's touching on the ethical stuff. The reason being is because that's where most of the concern is, and we've found that if you can get past that fear, we're not trying to force people to use AI. We're trying to say, actually, let's have a more informed discussion. Let's create a more shared understanding of what AI is and AI isn't at this current time. We're then seeing the promise of people like, okay, now that you've explained it in a way that actually is relevant, and actually I can see there's still challenges but also benefit, I'm actually interested now to see what we could potentially do with it. So that's what we're starting to see, is a lot of community organizations and communities start to see how it's more relevant and can be helpful, but also trying to ensure that you don't have to just jump into it. It's actually about how do we have informed discussions, and then you guys are in the driving seat around making that decision around use of it. So yeah, that's what we see.
Yeah, I mean, that makes total sense. I think, you know, ha- agency in new technology is important, and being able to control the terms of how you engage with it. On the environmental side, this is definitely a concern. I mean, a lot of people in the US have this concern, and I think a lot of people around the world have concerns about the environmental implication of some of these technologies, and things like, you know, the data, the physical infrastructure, and how a lot of the data centers use a lot of resources and stuff like this.
Yep.
How do you, when you talk with people who are concerned about this, like, how do you navigate that? How do you kind of help? How do you talk about, like, how do you sit down with them with this issue?
Yeah, good question. So I think the approach that we take, so in our, concept, and I'll use the Pacific concept, we have a concept called talanoa. And usually what a tauranga is the ability to kind of sit on, I guess, the same level and be able to kind of communicate within in a shared space. So the way that we design our workshop is not a class kind of setup. The way that we set up is specifically in a circle to put matters into the middle and for us to discuss. So we tell everyone that nothing is off. You can't. You can say whatever you want into the space. Obviously, we try and create a safe space as possible. But if you've got questions around AI and things you've seen, let's put it in. We don't come from the position that we have all the answers. We say that we've got a perspective. We're also fortunate that we get to sit with many communities, and we're quite active of looking online and what's going on and trying to, kind of sense make around where are things at, and then present that into the conversation. So we've been in rooms where people are very fearful. They don't necessarily come out of that fear, but they get to a place where they're like, okay, I can now see that, there's a bit more, pros and cons, not just simply cons in this space. At the same time, we try and ensure that those that just see, this is real, this can do a lot for us in terms of AI can do so much for us. We also say, have you considered these challenges that come with it as well? So in terms of the way that we approach it, we kind of utilize some of the tools and kind of assets that we have within our culture to actually put it into a space that people are familiar with, and then allows them to actually have really strong discussions. And like I said, most of the questions we get are ethical questions, like, is this Terminator? Is this like that Skynet thing? Is this environmental concerns real? Like, what about our brains? Are we getting dumber by using something? Like, put these into the middle, and let's actually kind of unpack that and kind of see where we can go from there. So that's how we approach it.
Yeah, this makes total sense. And I guess one question I have for you is around how equipped, once an organization's or the individual's concerns are addressed, how equipped do they feel in being able to figure out how to use the technology? And I'm going to pick on a slightly different related set of technology. In my experience with machine learning, there could be a lot of organizations that are like, we want to use machine learning, we want to use this, and especially when it was the new thing, but like, they both didn't know how, and they didn't it took technical expertise to be able to utilize machine learning to physically build machine learning models. Often took a data scientist. It took someone with the technical expertise. But many of the AI tools are a bit more like ChatGPT. You can start using on your phone and whatever. It doesn't necessarily take that technical expertise. How equipped do you feel like organizations are when they're like, we do want to use this technology to actually sit down and start using it?
Yeah, good question. So the way that we, I guess if I could talk into how we do our workshops generally, is that we've kind of designed a structure that's, again, come off the back of doing so many that we've kind of figured out how we can get them to a place where they want to engage with AI. So basically we start with kind of what is AI and kind of unpack it. What we've noticed and found is that many people kind of just see AI as ChatGPT and all these large language models. But once we start opening it up and start showing the history, it goes back. We pull up a graph that shows, because there's a lot of things that have happened all the way back to the 50s. There's so many things that have happened that we haven't coined as AI or in the sphere of AI just because we haven't been focused on it. So once we start unpacking that, it's amongst many things that you kind of have, from whether your devices to, so many things that you've already got. I think a lot of people start going, oh, okay, it's been around us for a while. Hey, why haven't we been informed about that? So perhaps they just said it in different words and language, like you said, like machine learning. That gives us the opportunity for us to then go, cool, so you know what it is, now we then move into how to use it. So a lot of kind of unpacking what it is allows people to see, okay, cool, now can I use it? What can we do some stuff with it? And within those activities, we kind of really do practical things that really are relevant to them. So even though we've got a structure that's quite similar within the workshops we do now, we ensure that we do kind of surveys or things beforehand to kind of know where they're at with it. So when it comes to the practical side of it, we're not just doing random prompt exercises, we're actually doing exercises that they can see relevance in it. And we've found the more relevant you can make them see it, then starts kind of the questioning of the possibilities of what's possible and all that. So we kind of take them through a few activities to kind of be able to see it, play with it, and kind of see how it can be relevant to them. And then we have kind of a final thing that does kind of change depending on who we're talking to, but we kind of show what's coming. So many people that we're engaging with, again, just to kind of a chat GBT, they have no idea around what an agent is and, how, I guess, these agents can be to do tasks for them. So we kind of show a bit of what's coming and kind of talking to how this may impact your organization and your community. So for us, we found it gives a real good foundation for people to, know what it is, have a bit of a play, and then kind of see how this may impact them further. And that kind of leads us into a conversation of them going, cool, now that you know what it is, how far do you want to go? And for us, there's kind of the side of using AI, so, utilizing the tools that exist. And then we have kind of a space which we call designing with AI. So actually not just using a ChatGPT and everyone adopting it, it's about, cool, how do you want to be more efficient within your organization? Do you want to, create more impact? How do we weave, AI or enable your systems to have that in? And what we've found is that most organizations, because they're so on the ground doing the work, that they don't have no time to reflect on their processes and their workload. So a lot of our early work is actually nothing to do with AI, or a little bit to do with AI. It's actually going, cool, what do you want to achieve? Because it looks like there's a lot of spaghetti lines going around that we might want to just simplify that. So then you're ready to take on whatever you want to do in this AI space. So yeah, that's kind of the work we do, but also that approach also allows us to get in, I guess, a space where they feel like they've got a shared understanding of AI and how they see it as an organization or as a team. And then it allows us kind of that foundation to go, cool, where do you want to go now from here? So yeah, that's what we do.
Yeah, that's really cool. I mean, one thing this reminds me of, I remember reading a book from like a business book, and the guy interviewed a lot of pretty like executive people in organizations, and he was talking about interviewing like a particular, like I think it was like the CEO of like a Fortune 500 company, like a pretty, like, and he was kind of surprised that the guy like agreed to an interview, because these are people that have a lot of time, and there's kind of a time is money, and they make a lot of money, so there can be a sense of like they're busy running things. But the guy like sat down and interviewed him, and he asked him like a bunch of questions about his like strategy for the organization, and then the CEO at the end of all of it was like, the plan was they're going to talk for like 15 minutes, but they ended up talking for like an hour and a half or something. And the CEO at the end of it was like, well, this was a really useful conversation. Let's do this again in a couple months. And the guy was, the author was confused, and the guy was, and what he realized was the reason the CEO liked it was because he asked all these systemic questions about like what are you trying to do overall as an organization, like what are your goals, and then questions about how he plans to implement that. And that forced him to kind of think in a big picture way outside of the kind of the normal daily grind of, I guess, doing the work. And the reason I bring this up is I wonder also if even like as a consultant, if even these sessions in and of themselves have that effect, because in thinking about how can we use AI to do the stuff we do, kind of forces people to sit down and think, well, what do we do? What do we want to do? And those questions can actually, those kind of reflective questions can actually be super useful. Or yeah, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, totally that. And the reason why I mentioned all that too, and I should have added on, is that what I usually find with working with organizations, it's not that they want massive productivity gains. Like, yes, they want their job to be a little easier or, a lot more simpler than what they're dealing with. But a lot of them are really geared for, impact-driven, objectives, which usually don't consist with trying to find money for that, which I try and make it a thing that actually, in order to kind of achieve some of those impact-driven goals or visions, we do have to have resources, and there are ways to kind of, utilize AI or enable your systems to be able to support you on your journey. But a lot of them is about, how can we do things in order for, how can we do things to make sure that we really support people? Which is quite an interesting conversation when you then introduce AI, because then, again, we're still kind of seeing things, I guess, evolve and grow. But I think one thing that a lot of people start to see when they kind of, I guess, go throughout the workshop we run or even have conversations with us is that they start to ask themselves like, if this can do a lot of what I can do, what is the difference that I bring to this? And I'm saying, well, there is a lot of things that I can see that you can bring to this, but I mean, it's not just coming in, building the system, gaining all these resources, and then you're off with it. A lot of these are now having to deal with extra conversations and extra questions around, okay, this technology is implemented into our organization. Yes, there's going to be some benefits, but there's also going to be some other things that change. And if this impact is around people, these visions of goals around people, what does that mean? So a lot of the stuff is real. Like I said with even our workshop, it's yes, there's strategy, system stuff, but a lot of it comes back to like capability building, really, and people kind of thinking, okay, this might have more impact than we probably first thought. Yeah, let's really consider how do we not only navigate the future that is in front of us as an organization, but also kind of we're going to have to share some of this with our community because it's going to impact in so many different ways. So yeah, what I would say is that that's what we're navigating at the moment. So we kind of haven't figured out, it's all evolving. It's so different for each organization, but we've noticed that they start to go, okay, we're going to implement AI. It's not just a super grab a new CRM and set it up. It's actually this is going to change the dynamics of how we actually move forward. So let's think about this.
Yeah, this makes total sense. Yeah, can you give an example of how this might play out, or how you might navigate this social side?
Yeah, so I would still say we're still trying to navigate it, and it's really interesting because things are ever evolving in the space of AI too. That one of our jobs is that we share what's going. So I guess one of the big things that's happened over the last month has been obviously Multibot or Claude, OpenClaw, and its ability to obviously be your own assistant. Obviously, there's a lot of challenges that come with it currently because it's still a project and has all these security challenges and all of that. But by introducing, these are what technologies here and probably will be seen a lot more. And then also talking about people's roles. Some of them are like pure administration roles. They're like, so that thing's probably going to do my role. And I'm like, yeah, it could. And I think this is a conversation with the organization around, what can be done to not just go, cool, let's replace you. Actually, how can we utilize your strengths? Does this mean that this may take some of that role, but you have all these other qualities that you can add to the organization? So what we try and do in our best way is kind of have kind of constant catch-ups with leadership to kind of say, hey, these concerns are coming up with people. Have you guys discussed them? How can we take that into consideration when we're strategizing, especially if you're still wanting to, achieve things for your people and the communities you serve. So yeah, I want to say we've figured that out. We're just navigating that as we go through, and I think a big part of what we kind of bring is kind of knowing that change is happening. Change is obviously the only constant in this world, but how we kind of support you and kind of provide perspectives and kind of share some stuff that, because we work with other organizations and other communities, these can maybe help you on your journey. So yeah, we don't have a specific we figured it out. It's almost like we're constantly with organizations and then kind of grappling with like the tension of what does this mean for our people.
Yeah, this makes total sense. I guess, yeah, it definitely seems like this could change some of those dynamics, but it seems like there could be concern in that, but there's also promise in that. Like it seems like there's a lot of hope to like um, I do hope like I have I have mixed feelings with replacing jobs because it is definitely a concern. At the same time, there some of the jobs that seem to be most key to be replaced by AI seem to be jobs that are kind of mechanized and basically involve turning humans into like a semi-algorithmic process. And
Mm-hmm.
I hope that within these types of organizations, people who do that kind of work could spend less time doing that type of work and do more time doing work that kind of comes out of their personality and who they are and what they have to contribute.
Yeah. Totally, and that's the same perspective that I have within this work. Is that yes, there dynamics change within how work may carry out as time goes on, but I do see that's a lot of opportunity to be cool. Let it do some of the work that and for most people, not everyone, but for most people that we kind of connect with, they don't want to be doing that work. It's just obviously part of their role and what they do. But it's showcasing like, hey, that can take care of the work you don't want to do, and you're able to focus on the work that you want to, which is usually connecting with people and doing activities and programs and doing things that are really going to build capability with other people in the community. That sounds like a future that sounds like an opportunity that we can actually lean into. And I think then that carries on this other cycle of conversation of like how far can it go? Can it eventually, if we think about robots and I'm like, well, I can't say they will never get to that place, but I'm saying at this present time, it's about how to ensure that you can perform what you're doing and ensure, and that's kind of why we're going down the impact-driven spaces, because many of the organizations we're focused, they're not really focused on profit-driven, they're really focused on people. So the conversation of, again, replacing is not this is a conversation of like, okay, cool, if we can replace that, how else can we see the people that are within our organization or the people we serve, how can we help them flourish? So that's where kind of we try to help them keep leaning into that.
Yeah, this makes total sense. And what do you, so in terms of, I guess, Maori and maybe in general Pacific Island communities, one concern that I will frequently hear from some of my, I guess I'll specifically focus on Maori, on some of my Maori friends, is that they'll talk about how the models were built in other cultures, most often the US, because that's where most of the tech organizations are, but how they're built in other cultural contexts. And then sometimes when they get applied to either New Zealand or to like Maori or Pacific Island communities in general, there's kind of weirdnesses in how it applies. Or what's your experience with this, or how do you think about this?
Yeah, so totally. Like one of the things that we do share about is obviously within these models they've obviously been built by others and obviously supported by some other kind of AI or agent tool that obviously has a bias or a perspective that is not of Maori culture, and so whoever's obviously built it, there's kind of that stuff that plays into it. And I guess one of the things that's interesting for me too is because a lot of the conversation is always centered around what these big tech corporates doing, especially in America, and what they're bringing out. But we try and open the conversation up as like there are closed, obviously, source model, and there's open source, and there's multiple ways that you can actually do this, and there's obviously the ability to create and train your own models. Like there's so many ways to kind of do this. And again, it's not for every organization, but it's kind of opening up their horizons and saying we don't have to just follow what we're being given. But for myself specifically, we tend to look at a lot of what's happening across the world because what are they doing differently? What are they doing new? But even with some of the organizations that we're working with, they're trying to build their own models. And I know of Māori communities specifically that are looking at it from, I guess, the whole stack of like, where does this data go? Can we have our own systems? And again, a lot of this is kind of impractical because we don't have, I guess, our own data centers. And, there's a lot more to than just building something that's, really specifically built for you and by you. However, like for our cultures, and I don't know if some of the people that you've engaged with that are Māori as well, one of the big concepts that we have in our culture is what we call mana motuhake. I guess the translation of mana motuhake is self-determination, so the ability to make choices and going back to that whole agency conversation. So I think for me, we kind of approach the conversation of there is actually a lot more ways to go about this, but what makes sense to you right now within this time, within this resource, you kind of have to kind of weigh that up as you make these decisions. So open source sounds great, and we've shown a few tools that you can utilize open source models and keep your data in a device that is more, I would say, local than having to send it through a closed model that goes back to your big tech. But it's just again providing visibility and opportunities and possibilities that then they can make the decision on what's best for them.
Yeah, this makes total sense. I mean, it does seem like the current generation of AI is both, it's built in a cultural context, but it also enables new ways to kind of build off of it and build its own unique versions, whether that's like a specialized version for lawyers or a version that's specific to a specific organization or specific community. And that might have its own form of, um, I don't know the right word. The first word I could think of is like enculturalization, like ways of applying it in different contexts.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I think, yeah, that's why I raised the idea of mana motuaki, because I think a lot of it comes back to the whole conversation of how can we, be self-determined in what we choose and do. And I think, yeah, I I think for myself that's been in these I guess spaces, and I would say there's also like we're not monolithic as well. So like any other indigenous culture, there are those that have been raised urban like myself, and then those that have been raised on we call it the marae, and kind of learnt I guess in our culture we call tikanga, so protocols and ways in which to be in grow as Māori. But general sense is about how do we have the option to make those choices. And currently a lot of people just see as like it's like I'll be honest, it's just ChatGPT. That's all they're seeing. We're like, no, there's other models, but also did you know that there's other ways that these models get created and you can do different things. So yeah, for us it's just about proposing some of these options that they can have a look at, and then again have the agency to make that decision go forward.
Yeah, that makes total sense. One other question I wanted to ask you about, I guess this is a kind of a question of scale. So, um, you what you said was before a while ago was that you kind of run these seminars where you sit everyone down,
Mm.
and obviously for a smaller organization that could be like the whole team, right? But obviously
Yeah,
there's different organizations, very different sizes. For an organization of tens of thousands of people, obviously that's not going to work, or that's only going to work with like a select few people if you do it with like a certain department or something. But like the how do you interact with larger organizations, or how do you kind of take your method and scale it when working with organizations that are large enough to not solely be able to be based off of like face-to-face interactions?
yeah, it's a good question. So one of the things that we've chosen to do, and I come from a background of, I guess, like this, being able to interact online and talk to many people when doing something. But what we've chosen to do is kind of take that approach of being face to face and being in a space where we can have, um, what I said before, talanoa, or conversations within a circle team. To your point, it does have scaling issues because obviously it's harder to do it with many more people that are in the area. I think the biggest one we've been able to do, which wasn't a circle necessarily, but was still kind of the same atmosphere, was about 160. But you kind of do notice the difference of a kind of larger size trying to operate in comparison to something that's a bit more, bit more fewer people. And we know, I guess, by nature that that's not going to be the fastest way to scale, especially if you're trying to run I guess, a business in general. But I think what we've found is that for us, the difference between having a conversation online, and this is just me speaking, this doesn't necessarily mean it's objectively true. The richness in those spaces, we found that the conversation is a lot more, open. People are really not even just conversating with us. They're like, "Oh, I've seen this." Like it's an environment and experience within it. So does it work with everyone? Probably not. But we have found that that's actually allowed us to, yeah, have really good, strong conversations around, what it is, what can it be, in comparison to being online, which you can do to some effect. But when you have many people, we've noticed in other stuff that it creates challenges. So yeah, that's what we see.
Yeah, I mean, this makes total sense. There are within organizational psychology or organizational management, there are whole movements that we'll talk about. Like, no, it's about you get
you basically can get things in smaller groups. So you get things in smaller groups, and then you send them out to. This is almost like a discipleship model. Like you send them out to do stuff in their smaller groups, and then cascade out further and further from there, like a ripple. And there is, I think, some value to that in and of itself, because people are relational in general. This is just an aspect of humanity, and but also maybe specifically when people have like concerns and in like high emotional environment, they often, to address people's concerns, people just need to be listened to. And I, this might be the case for married people, for people in general, but maybe also kind of sitting in a group and talking it out can be helpful in like Maori cultural contexts or other cultural contexts too. But like there are people who basically say, if you want to make organizational change, this is the most effective way to do it. So yeah.
Yep.
One, I guess, so in terms of what would you recommend for somebody who wants to incorporate AI into their own organization? Like, how would you recommend somebody consider that? And maybe both on the tech side, but then also what would you recommend they do on like the social side to kind of work with other people in their organization to help kind of convince them and get them on board?
Yeah, good question. So I would say that and I'll speak for obviously the organisations we've been serving. So predominantly there have been organisations that either supporting Māori Pacific or have a large contingency of Māori Pacific within their staff. And I guess one of the big I guess narratives that sit in our space is how we're making decisions for our mokopuna. So they're called mokopuna decisions. So mokopuna in our cultures are grandkids. So it's all about long-term thinking and, what are the things that we're doing now and what impacts are they going to have, not just 10, 20 years, like 100 years down the road. So for many of the organizations that we work with specifically, we kind of ask that question first, like, what is that future? Like, what is that future you're trying to walk into, and try and really understand, what that is first. And the reason why we do is two things. Is one, to kind of get a bit more feeling and understanding where they want to move to, because there are similarities within the organizations that we work with, but they are quite different too. They're quite unique depending on what they're focusing on. But also, second thing is that's kind of where our heart is and why we're doing this work. There's many out there that actually serve people to integrate this technology to serve for productivity and profit gain, which again we're not against, but I think for us it's about focusing on more. Where does this organization want to go, and is it something that we believe in, to kind of apply ourselves and contribute to this organization's desire for that. So that's kind of what we do, and kind of assess that, and then after we've kind of figured that out, kind of from the tech side, I guess we kind of do take somewhat the traditional approach of like, okay, scale is all about, if you can't scale complexity, you can only scale something that's simple. So it's actually working with the organization to understand how complex it is, and there are ways to kind of tighten, not necessarily, how much people are doing work, but it's like, what are you focused on? What are those focuses that are going to get you to that path that you've just described to us, previously? And it's really around, that's the strategy side really, and then kind of saying, hey, cool, you said this, but did you know that these things are coming? Did you know these things are coming? So kind of trying to make it as robust and as we can within the time, and sitting with organizations to kind of go through that, because you don't know what you can't see, right? So a lot of our job is to try to introduce things that they may not be privy to. Like a good interesting thing that people find is, especially with these ages, is that it can do things. It's not just a simple case of talking back to it. It can actually go do an activity for you. So for them seeing that, they changes their minds around what they could possibly do. And then we also show, especially for a lot of our organizations, they have governance and board, and we kind of show that, did you know that there is a country that is purely got an AI that's part of their cabinet? Like, have you considered that a part of your governance? Do you want it a part of your governance? So a lot of our conversations is really trying to say, cool, where are you going? Can we throw a few things at it, and it's something that you still want to carry on? And then from there, try and support them in trying to understand how can we make this simple. And I guess simple is not the same simple for everyone, but something that's actually got a great foundation that then we can apply, whether that's building a new system for them that's more AI enabled, whether that's integrating some of the tools that they're already got and supporting them on that journey. And what we really love to do, or what's really important for us, is that we try our best not to create technical dependency on what we do. We try our best to work with organizations that have a real desire to go, cool, I don't just want you to come in and build it, but we want to learn how we can understand this and do it. So again, similar to our workshop, it's not the easiest and most scalable approach, but for us, and why we started second half, was to enable and empower as much as people, whether that's in the communities or the people that are serving those communities as well. So yeah, that's how we go about it. So in terms of making the organization think, it's like, where do you want to go? How do you currently go about trying to get there, and what does your kind of thing look like under the hood? Are you guys, what does all of that look like? And then that gives us a good foundation to go, cool, this is what we can do for you.
Yeah, this makes total sense. I guess, I could definitely see the value of what you're saying. One other, this is kind of final question, but what do you see as like some of the biggest promises of AI, and what are some of your biggest concerns with AI?
Cool. So similar to what we talked about before, I think the promises, if I had to talk into my heart here, this is not necessarily shared, but I guess thought across Māori communities, but definitely my thought and my upbringing. So I've lived in an urban community within Auckland, and kind of the, I guess, second generation of diaspora of those that have come, whether it's come from different parts of rural communities into kind of the bigger cities in New Zealand, or come from the Pacific Islands that have migrated here for kind of a better future. And I guess my kind of, view is that a lot of our people obviously came here to get work and get into work that could obviously make them more money than they were making back wherever they had originally come from. But a lot of that work was kind of in the spaces of kind of labor or intensive labor. So that would be factory work, that would be work out in the field. There'd be different places in which you would use your manual labor. So many of my whānau, or my family, that's our name for whānau, for family is whānau, many of my community are still within those realms. And, when I kind of heard of artificial intelligence, as well as when I was studying, so back in 2014 is when I was studying creative technologies and doing an honours paper, and I at that time first thought that the jobs that are going to go, and I did a whole piece on this, are going to be the labour jobs, because those are the easy ones. Funny enough, it's kind of somewhat been the reverse, right? We're kind of seeing kind of knowledge workers and white collar jobs kind of be the, I guess, most at risk currently, given what AI can do. But obviously for people that are still labour, if there's no upskilling, reskilling, or understanding of where the future is going, there's a real fear around, what does that mean for our people and our economic status within, a society, if all we know is to do physical labour and there is no opportunity to do that in the near future. So for me, the promise is that besides that, we've got technology that coming, not necessarily now, but in time, that can do that. The promise for me is that how can we create a society which does that, but we are still able to economically gain from that? So we don't have to do work as what we once knew. We are able to work in a way that we want to focus on the cool stuff we want to do in life, whether that's creative projects, whatever they may mean, being as someone at home looking after whānau or family, doing stuff in life. But if the economic or the means to make money is going to be a lot different, how do we ensure we think about that future and don't see just the challenges, but see the opportunity to set up a foundation for us to actually thrive? And I think that's where we kind of come from, is that yes, there are some challenges, but trying to say that actually let's think differently. If this technology can do a lot of that stuff, we just got to figure out how do we have other ways of making economics, whether that's through ownership of these robots, whether there's ownership through these businesses that are able to give us resources so they can do that work, but we can then focus on our passions, as a simple way of saying it. So for me, there's a promise in that and in that future. And I think for some people we talk to, they say it's very idealistic, but I'm like, well, we've got an opportunity in time to actually really have a hard conversation around this, and actually make some roads into that, especially given how fast it's evolving and where it's going. I guess the challenge is alongside that is that there is a lot of, I guess, still fear around that even being a possibility, but then fear turns into wait, fear turns into not doing anything about it. And I'm like, yeah, not to say that we'll miss our opportunity, miss our shot, but I guess big part of where we come into this conversation is saying that I think we can have a different conversation, which means kind of looking at, work, differently and how we perceive work. And I think a lot of it, and this is not just to do with culture, I think a lot of the fears, because it's an identity piece, right? For most people, they introduce themselves as, hi, I work at this place, or I do this stuff. So for us, it's about reintroducing what that looks like. Apologies. I've got those sniffles. This awkward weather isn't helping. But what's currently not taking place is greater conversations around how we can move into a society that could utilize this technology to enable us to do the things that we want to do. And I'm really interested in the work. I know I am the first one to kind of coin it. I watch different thought leaders and community people talk about this meaning economy and what that looks like. And I think for myself, we're really interested in that as well. And I guess one of the things that I would like to say too is something that we're really leaning into and focusing within our culture, or within Māori and in the Pacific, is that you would notice that at the start I introduced myself using a pepeha. So the reason why we use pepeha is basically our whakapapa, or our genealogy. So we introduce ourselves by not just who we are, but in connection to all of the things where we come from, down to who we are. And I think there are a lot of things that we can utilize from our culture to help us navigate these spaces of identity as things start to change. So that's what we kind of introduce into our spaces. We've got a lot of things that we can pull from and draw from, but one of the things we actually have to kind of talk about is, do we want to live the same way and keep the status quo going, or does this technology allow us to kind of, I want to say, live those visions that we've always had for ourselves and do the things we want to do, and enable and allow these tools to enable us to be able to do that. So yeah, that's it's like promising concern all in one. But I feel AI, and not just AI, the technology that are coming. There's many more that are coming. If used right, if used in a way that supports people, we think it can really support people to do what they want in life. But there is this kind of transition we have to go through, and I think that's our fear, is like how open, how much attention are we giving to it. So hopefully I've answered your question. I feel like I went all over the place, but yeah, long story short, for me, there is a lot of promise in AI, but there's also concern that we are just not necessarily having those conversations and moving to have that conversation.
Yeah, this makes total sense. I absolutely agree with this. I think you're one thing I think about is how currently the AI technology is kind of set up to benefit often specific large corporations, like big tech companies, but like the specific corporations that are kind of advancing the technology, and we'll say the elites within those corporations, so like the owners, the stockholders, whoever. And I think there's a lot of promise, and there's a lot of promise for gain, but I think a lot of the concerns on some level stem from the fact that it's currently very unequally distributed. But I think that's as much a technological question as it is like a social or societal question. It's an economic question, like how to distribute resources is like almost literally part of the definition of economics. But like yeah, what do you think? Like, what do you think? I know I just said final question before, but like, what do you think it would look like to maybe distribute these benefits across communities in a better way? And you could answer that broadly, or you can answer that like specifically in New Zealand or among Maori and Pacific Island communities.
Yeah, such a good question. I haven't thought about it that I guess that well, but Yeah, but I would say, like, for me, if we even look at, for us in terms of New Zealand, like, we not we still, but yes, we still have a digital divide. Even, take AI out of the conversation, just accessibility to devices for many of our communities is difficult. Accessibility to Wi-Fi and internet in our rural communities is still very difficult. And obviously, there's a lot more technology that's enabling that, but there are challenges, and but there's also what's interesting about that. It's not just about challenge, but it's also conversations of whether we want to. So I think what I'm finally starting to understand and see is that obviously there's kind of two separate thoughts here, right? There's the ability to use technology for productivity and spreading, economic prosperity across more people, but there's also kind of this what I've kind of seen, and again, I don't want to say that this is just my thoughts on the matter. Is that for many of our culture, it's about preservation too. How do we preserve spaces and places without technology dominating those spaces? So one of the things that I kind of value, I didn't value it as a young child, to be honest, but one of the things that I value when we go back to our marae, which is our meeting house or a place that we're from, there's no technology. Like, there's technology, like, typical, the normal ones, but apologies, I just um, there is technology there, but like, your signals out, you can't text anyone. Like, you are there with the people and there with the land, and there's so many benefits that come with it doing that, because you kind of break away and just kind of focus on what's at hand, or what you're doing. So I think for many of our communities that I've been to, they're like, do we need all of this? We like to kind of be disconnected to all of this if we could. So there's kind of these two, like, I would say, conversations that people are really strong on, either both sides of it, or in between it, that we're dealing with as well. So when we're talking about how do we kind of scale technology, I think for me, it comes back to why we set up what we're doing, is that we just want to know, or let them know, that these are all possibilities, that these possibilities exist, that we can do work to make it more accessible, whether that's devices itself or information for education. But again, you have to make that decision whether that's something that you want to lean to. But again, some people are like, cool, we're okay with just operating as we are. So we try our best to kind of show the other side of it. Like, these are things that, have you considered these things? Have you considered that? And if they had, that's not our choice to kind of convince them otherwise. Our ability is to ensure that they see that someone's hopefully come to them and said, this is a possibility, this is going to impact you like this is going to bring benefits like this, but you make that decision. So that's how we approach it.
Yeah, this makes total sense. And by the way, you're reminding me of when I, driving through the New Zealand countryside, and some of the most fantastically gorgeous places, I just completely lost reception. And it sometimes it forced me to be more in the moment, and sometimes that moment was, whether that was talking with people, or in some cases, if I'm hiking by myself, is to kind of be with nature. Um, but there can be large chunks of the New Zealand countryside with, at least with my provider, very bad reception. Um, so I did experience what you were talking about there, but like, what you're saying makes sense. I think this is something we have to build. Um, we have to build together, and I think it's important to think about how to build this in a way that benefits people. And I'm glad that you do the work that you've been doing in doing this specifically with Pacific Island communities and with organizations in New Zealand. My final question is just for anyone interested in learning more about your work, where would you recommend they go?
Yeah, so we have a website, secondhalf.co.nz. You can check our page out and see everything out there in terms of our work and many of the communities we're doing work with. I guess our most active social media is Instagram at the moment. Probably need to do a bit of work to ensure we share more of our story. I think one of the things is like the work we do is so in it that we don't share our story too often. But yeah, Instagram, secondhalf.co.nz, website, secondhalf.co.nz. You can check out our stuff.
Perfect. Well, I'll try to include that also in the description somewhere below us. And thanks for taking the time.
Cool. Thank you very much. Namahi.
All right. So this is you and I just talking. I'll cut this part at the end. But yeah, thanks again for doing this. If you could send the link to the website and the Instagram at some
Yep.
point. That would be helpful. And if you also have a moment to send like a profile picture, I think it's it's up to you if you want to make it more like professional or more casual. Like kind of, it's up to you and your self expression, I guess. But I find then
Yep.
for the thumbnail, including a face, because psychologically we just connect with faces.
Yep.
And I'll let you know when I'm ready to post it. It might take a little bit to edit, but then I'm really glad that you're doing all this, and yeah, this is really cool to talk through.
Appreciate it. Thank you, Stephen. And I guess, yeah, I'll send over the links and a photo for you to use. One thing I wanted to ask is, and hopefully a little bit of time, is that obviously I did a bit of research on your website and had a look a little bit, obviously understanding about you. But yeah, what's the goal for yourself, man? Like, obviously you've been able to interview many people. Like, what is kind of the mission you're on at the moment?
Yeah, so I guess I'm well with this. I kind of fell back into it. I was taking kind of a bit of a hiatus with the ethno data, and I think a lot of the stuff with AI. So like I actually started a different podcast series on a different topic, but then I was also kept having conversations about AI, and I was like, there's definitely a need here, so I'll restart it. But
Cool.
um I would say I've been kind of overall, I would say that like, you know, I told you I'm traveling the world, so I've been traveling for the last year and a half. And before I was working in tech, like immediately before I was working at Google, which is like the like the tech of tech. It's like the very very techy. But like I was kind of like, you know what, I wanted to take a break from all of this and as I was traveling. So I've been in multiple continents, like South America, Oceania,
Cool.
or whatever you call that region, Pacific Islands, and
Yep.
now I'm in Asia. But like, I'm kind of in a space where I'm ready to go back to it, but I've been kind of exploring how. I think
Mm,
I've been, I find talking with people about the space a bit more interesting. And I don't know, like I've been just kind of doing it because it's been something I've been finding fulfilling, and I've been I haven't like fully figured out what my like. I guess I'm in an exploratory stage rather than a like,
yep.
this is the hill I'm trying to climb. I'm kind of figuring out the the goals I have. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it totally makes sense. And I think similar to the conversation we had, like, it's taken me a while to even lean into this. I've done multiple businesses trying to figure out what is it that I want to do. And not that it was to purely build a business, but it was like, something I can really get my, I guess, teeth sunk into and really give it a go. And, for most of, I guess, the last 9 years, it's just been kind of like, oh, see where the world takes me. And so I totally hear what you're saying. And no, I'm just really interested because I managed to listen to some of the other conversations, obviously previous to this, and I was like, oh, it's such a cool conversations. And especially like, obviously there's stuff on YouTube around, raw AI automations and tech stuff, and then there is a lot of social commentary. But yeah, I think a lot of the stuff that all the conversations that I've heard you have with people. I mean, this is such a cool space that you're in. So yeah, I was just very interested in. Yeah,
Yeah.
where's that hole for you?
Yeah, I appreciate that, and I think one of the ironies is, I did them for a while and I liked them, but I got a little like burnt out doing like the much more singular thing. But like it's
Mm,
now very much ramped up. So like you might notice, like before I focused on data science, but like now it's data science and AI, and AI is probably because it's the one because this stuff is like you were hinting at in our conversation, but like it's much more on people's radar. It's like what it's kind of hit the threshold of like regular conversation, whereas data back in a couple years ago this was much more niche. But like
mm,
um, I think that part of my goal is around getting the nuances. It's a bit of like a social. It's a bit of the anthropologist in me. It's like the nuances of what people are doing. So like some of the people I've talked to have ranged from like, you know, social scientists who are super critical of AI and are like, you know, it's going to be, you know, it's awful, to people who are a bit more optimistic. You are a bit more on the optimistic side, which is good. But like the like, but like kind of understanding what are people doing, and getting more of a, because I think in a lot of those conversations about like AI in society, people have a very like monolithic, whether it's good or bad, understanding
Yes.
of what it is, but much
Yeah.
more of a like, there's so many different types of things, and kind of understanding some of those nuances. I don't know if that makes sense.
Oh, it totally makes sense. And I think, yeah, like, hopefully I try to express that as much as I can within, you know, when we do our workshops. A good example, like, it's so funny how many people approach us now and they're like, I do this with AI. I'm like, oh, cool. Like, it's not, I know we do AI with you, but it's like, there's almost like this, I don't know, for us, we just set this up to like actually go, cool, we're just putting the conversation out there. Yes, we have perspectives on it. Yes, we're doing stuff with it, but really it's trying to create a space where people can engage with it, and whether you like it or hate it, like, you know, that's your choice and your opinion. We just want the ability to have that conversation. So when I listen to some of the conversations that you've had, I'm like, it's similar to like us trying to just, it's not everyone has the one specific, you know, they're all optimistic. It's like everyone's coming from different lived experience, different perspectives. And I think for me, we're just trying to facilitate that. And I feel like you're all trying to facilitate in somewhat similar conversations with this around, what do you think? What do you see? So yeah, that's why I was just saying, it's really cool what you're doing now. One thing I probably just off the top of my head, I should have talked about more is, I think for us, we actually see AI as a public health issue. And that's something that we're driving a lot more within the work we do, trying to get a little bit more advocacy around public health infrastructure around this. Because I think that's, yeah, one of the things that we're seeing is that, yes, there's much opportunity there is, similar to, you know, other public health issues. There's going to be a lot of challenges that come, but we don't necessarily have the, and now in New Zealand anyway, there's no setup to go support people around it. It's kind of just fused in with everything else. Like, and we're seeing that, like, there are people that are experiencing, not many, but, you know, ChatGPT psychosis and different things where I'm like, there needs to be a bit more emphasis on, you know, the harm it may bring, but that doesn't mean we stop doing things that can do good for us. So yeah, we're kind of playing on both sides, because we know that it's not binary good or bad. There's just like anything that can be helpful, there's obviously ways you can misuse it as well.
Yeah, this makes sense. So when you say like a health issue, you mean from like a mental health perspective, in terms of people using it or to try to address some of their mental health concerns, and it presumably has a bit of a hit or miss with that, because it can help, but it can also lead to issues.
Yeah. So I didn't give the community development background I had, but I used to work at Auckland Council, so the council for the main city, and the specific work we did was community development advisors around alcohol and drug harm. So we used to go into communities that experiencing high drug and alcohol harm, which were predominantly Māori communities, unfortunately, and how to support them. But there was this whole space around reducing harm. So it wasn't abstinence that was being called for, because it's just totally, you know, difficult to say you can't all use alcohol, you can't all use drugs. It's actually going to space and go, how are we using it? Can we reduce the harm that's associated with it? But harm doesn't show up necessarily by just drinking it and consuming it. Harm shows up within the policies we have at government level, you know, different things that exist within our society that, you know, ideally people participate in civics and politics to do that, but that's kind of far-fetched for some of our communities. It's actually just coming into spaces and having a first conversation. And I feel a lot of the work we do at Second Life is similar. The AI is something big and broad and what you can do with it, but it's actually going into these spaces and go, do you know about it? If you didn't, well, we can let you guys know a lot about it, how you could use it, but totally your choice on how you kind of go with it. But yeah, when we say public health issues, both mental health side, but also just general well-being. Like, there are already evidence across the board around, you know, people that have committed suicide using chatbots, all these different things that a lot of health professions and a lot of people in the kind of council government space have just not even considered. So we're like, yeah, we're doing a bit of work on that side, and I yeah, just thinking I should have said something about that because that's a lot of our work that we're walking into.
Yeah, this makes sense. What do you see as some of the biggest, like it seems like suicide is one extreme, but what do you see as some of the gradations or some of the more like everyday kind of health things that maybe more regular people might do that are not quite at the extreme of suicide?
So I think at the more simple side, and it's more that kind of the cognitive side and atrophy. Most people not practicing judgment and discernment; they're just taking AI for what it's giving back. And a lot of what we do is try to share, like, obviously, if you just copy and paste from these tools and use them verbatim without questioning, they currently hallucinate, maybe they get better, but it's like trying to make sure that they stay in charge of, whatever responses they have. A lot of people have told us they haven't, and they've started to feel those effects of like, damn, I feel like I can't, I don't have the desire to critically engage with a lot of different things. So I think from that, there's that kind of everyday thing we see. And then that's obviously drawn out to, some of these bigger or wide evidence we're seeing of people like fully thinking that these, again, I don't know what your perspective on this, but fully thinking that these things are conscious, that they're another being and those having those effects on them as well. So ideally, we try to come from a sanitation perspective. Like there was a lot of work done in history to make sure that, if germs are around, we try and clean and get all that. Where I think it's easy to see us moving into like a smoking cessation thing where we're like, wait until it's caused us harm, and then we start creating some department to think about it. So we try to say, why don't we get ahead of this and say, cool, there's opportunity, but how are people thinking about, the impacts of this on people in terms of their well-being, but then obviously some of those broader social impacts as well. So yeah, that's what we there's a lot of stuff that we're doing, working with government departments and having those conversations around it.
Yeah, this makes total sense. I think that you and some of these issues are complicated because some of these issues do predate, AI technology and people being lonely has to do with societal factors that need solutions. I'm thinking particularly in the US because that's the cultural context I know where loneliness is on the rise. And obviously like AI is not going to fully answer that, but like also AI is not responsible for that as a technology because it's bigger issues, but at the same time it kind of can feed into that and obviously other technologies like social media have a history of having concerns around this too, and AI seems to be kind of coming up as a new, more intensive instance of some of these same problems that have been around for a while.
Yeah, totally. And I think that's cool because we've got a few, not necessarily government departments, but a few, I guess, specific things, like if I take social media that people are focusing on as we need to reduce harm on it. So yeah, part of us is like, what about, given that you've got machine learning over here and other things that happen with the social media, there's broader context and other harms that can come from things that are fused with AI going forward. So we know it's a specific government department around AI, reduce harm, I don't know, and then there's the side question of whether we want government to be the sole proprietors of how to reduce harm. There's another conversation in itself, but yeah, that's something that we're really focusing on. As much as I'm optimistic and what that means, it's also how do we ensure that we have even a balance around, people that are on all sides of this conversation trying to figure out how we make the best for people, which is easier said than done. I guess it's, when you got people with different opinions and thoughts around how to go forward. So yeah, sorry to kind of keep you longer than you were, but I really enjoyed our conversation today, and thank you for even wanting to speak, or thanks Shay for suggesting myself.